Now, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a 20% rise in energy bills expected to come in this April when government support is due to end. Now, for those for whom last year is a dim and distant memory, the average house in April 2022 paid a combined electric and gas bill of about £1,971 a year. That works out to about 164 quid a month. And that was after the war in Ukraine had started, right? It started pushing prices up. It used to be about 100 quid. This April, with the price cap rising, the average bill is going to be £3,000, which works out to 250 quid every month. And Kevin, it's pointing out here that is going to push another 1.7 million households into fuel poverty. So there's going to be millions of people who just can't afford to pay that, aren't there?
Yeah, that'll be 8.4 million households spending more than 10% of their income on fuel bills, heating and light, which is what the definition of fuel poverty is. It's a phenomenal blow, and this is what the cost of living crisis is about. People are really feeling the pinch, I think, on energy bills and on food. They're two areas. You've got to have light, you've got to have heat, you've got to eat. So they're unavoidable expenditure. You can cut back a little bit, but nowhere near, because as you point out, they've essentially doubled now in just over a year, and then they're going to go up another 20%. That cumulative increase is going to be getting on for 1.5 times. And the government can do something about it. It can do more if it chooses, but at the moment it isn't.
No. And morning, Mike. Morning, Roger. And morning to public art critic, possibly not his real name, who says how people tolerated the Tories for so long. I suspect, public, that if the Labour Party had been in power for 15 years and was having these same things to deal with, we'd be saying the same stuff about Labour, because some of this is down to government policy and some of it is just sheer bad luck. Kevin, do you think this is down to the Tories? Do you think that, I mean, obviously they've got the solution, haven't they, to try and fix this? They can set the price cap, because that is within their power. They can tell us how much our energy has to be.
Yeah, the big rise in wholesale fuel prices was caused by Putin invading Ukraine, disrupting supplies, great rise around the world from that. Can't blame the government for that, but you can blame the government, one, for continuing with a cap that didn't work anyway, really, because it was on gas prices, wholesale gas prices at the time. Why isn't it linked to renewables and a lot of other cheaper energy forms? Two, the government could have done more to take money from these companies that have got windfalls. They're war windfalls. They're not from investment and innovation. It could have come in with a windfall tax without loads of loopholes, something that really hurt, and use that to subsidise bills. And then thirdly, it could just use public funds to get people over this, what is hopefully a temporary hurdle, a real pain, because it's fed through into inflation, but it's also fed through, for instance, the public service strikes, which are basically being created by rising inflation as people try and protect their living standards. So I think the government's made a complete hash of it. So yeah, it didn't get all the blame, but it certainly deserves some of the blame.
Yeah, it's certainly fudged the handling of it, hasn't it? Now, Roger says this cost of living crisis is getting way out of order now. This all adds into the cost of living and the general, how you manage to get through that day. The one upside I can see, perhaps, Kevin, is that this price rise comes in April, when, of course, lots of people are turning their heating off, turning it down. Those of us who have their hot water heated by gas or electric are still going to have that. And it's you can't not use the lights at nighttime, really, in quite the same way. Alan says it's time for the government to grow some and do something about it. The wholesale price has been falling. What's going on?
Yeah,
well, I understand. He's got a point, doesn't he, Kev? Because the wholesale price is falling, which has given the Tories about £11 billion of windfalls, money they weren't expecting to have. But the government's got to use that 11 billion. I mean, I presume Jeremy Hunt's going to want to have a March budget, which has him handing out cash or looking like he's handing out cash, really. Yeah. But he's got to pay for nurses, paramedics, junior doctors. He's got to pay for all the public buildings that have got bigger energy bills now. Some of these things have to take priority. How can they also use the same money to subsidise our fuel. I mean, they've got to square that circle somehow, haven't they?
Yeah, but the government hasn't spent anywhere near as much as it feared it would have to. So therefore, you could roll that cash over and impact now. But you're quite right. There's no doubt. Let's not avoid it. There's a lot of demands on public spending. But targets, when the government will say, "Oh, there's a black hole" or whatever. Well, it sets a target. It shifts the target all the time. It's kind of it's just an accountancy system by the government. I mean, personally, I would have energy in the public sector. I would have us owning it, and then we could perhaps, as the French have with EDF, you get much smaller rises. I think it's only 6% in electricity over there, much higher here. In fact, EDF operating in the UK has made a fortune for the parent company back in France. There just are. It's whether the two sides of the government are. And I think too often with this government it's on the side of the energy producers and suppliers who are getting huge profits. And we've got a lot of fat cat bosses who are getting all the cream up the price of other people. But you're quite right. When you get to spring, you use less electricity and gas. However, if you're on a direct debit, that is planned for, and that your direct debit payments are the same all year round, but you'll go into your account probably in deficit from the winter. So yeah, you use less electricity and gas, but you're basically just paying what you've borrowed last winter or will be putting aside for next winter. Different for people on prepayment meters, but we know that they pay a higher rate all the way through the year.
Exactly. The people that are going to suffer the most through some of this, people on prepayment meters, that there could be directed help for them. They could be using the regulator to set that energy price either cheaper or the same as everybody else's. The fact that it has to be more when you are poorest, I always found quite disgusting. But when they cap energy prices for the consumer, what they're also doing, of course, is capping profits for the actual the producer. So the consumer gets their prices capped, but the producer also gets their profits capped. And I suppose the government would argue, well, look, we have a windfall tax of sorts. It's a bit of a small one, but we have a windfall tax of sorts on that. So we do end up taxing that as well at the other end. And then we can use that to pay back to consumers. But hang on a minute, why don't they just cap the prices to start with? So we've all got more money in our pockets, so we don't need the extra tax sort of coming through. I mean, if they're against a windfall tax, that would be the sensible thing to do, is to cap the profits, cap the cost for us, and the economy keeps limping along.
No, you could absolutely. If it was publicly owned, that'd be very easy to do, and then you just run the energy sector either at a profit, big profit, or occasionally a loss, and you could probably justify a loss through this period to protect people. And then if we get into a position of rising living standards again, then you can begin to claw some of that back if you like. But yeah, the system they've gone for with private companies does seem incredibly complicated. For instance, the issuing of vouchers, which are a significant portion have never been claimed by people because they're unaware they are there. And you're quite right about prepayment meter users. They tend to be those in the lowest income brackets who are paying the highest rate for their fuel, and that's just morally wrong. Everybody should pay the same rate. In fact, the argument would be those on prepayment meters should probably pay a bit less, but the companies try and justify them paying more on the grounds it costs more to administer that system than those of us who are more comfortable with bank accounts, and we just sign a direct debit.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, then there's some people with private landlords who are running the energy bills for them and necessarily getting all the benefit, the money, the £66 a month that's been coming off. And then there's people like me whose part of your fuel is heating oil, because there's nothing else out here in the sticks. And the money for that I just got an email last week saying, oh, you've got 200 quid off your fuel bill, your oil bill. I bought my oil last June. And it was 3 times what it normally was. So to get 200 quid now is kind of, well, okay, thanks very much.
Susie, can I just say, though, are you going to get a very sore left arm holding that mug up?
No, I've got a chair here. I'm not just sitting around like this, like a teapot. I actually have a chair that I lean on. Don't worry.
I've got a mug like yours, but I forgot to bring it. I've got my Sunderland winning the Papa John's.
Oh, for goodness sake. What's the point of having some brand product placement if you don't use the right product? Sunderland. Now,
Newcastle fans will appreciate it, though, because they
keep asking us your questions, everybody. Do you appreciate Kevin's Sunderland mug or the News Agenda mug? Which, of course, goes out to the people who ask us the best questions. What do you think about the energy bill crisis? Do you think the government should do more? Do you think the government's got enough to do with this money and it has to spend things a bit more wisely? And April might be the right time, considering we're using less, to let the prices go up a bit.